We are the team here at Unmapped Expeditions, and we are here to give you a bit of information about the beautiful island of Espiritu Santo. We did hold a live session last night, but tech got the better of us and it didn't record. So we're going to go through it again this morning, but we're also going to touch on all of those questions that were asked in the live session. And if there are any information still outstanding, please do feel free to reach out to us either email or social media. So let's get into it. So first up, if you don't already, please do follow along on social media. It really does help us a lot as a small and developing business. We've got Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and a YouTube channel also. So during this presentation, we're going to go through, firstly, who we are. I'm Sophie, and this is Hayden. We're going to talk about why Santo and give a little bit of a geography lesson on where you can find it. We're going to introduce our expeditions and why we've designed them in a certain way. And then we're going to talk about some of the island highlights and why the reason you want to travel to Santo. And then we're going to also touch on where we would stay. We'd recommend some accommodations and what we like to include, and also touch on some really helpful visiting points, such as when to visit, what to pack, where to stay, all that kind of thing. And then we did have a brief questions and answers at the end, which we'll go through, and also what's next for Unmapped Expeditions.
So let us introduce ourselves. I'm Hayden, this is Sophie, and together we're partners in life and adventure. You can see in the top left picture, that's actually where we met, working together on a hiking trail in Queensland. And this is a bit of a snapshot of some of the adventures that we've had, both for work and play, all over the world, and also that heavily feature our son, Charlie, who we've dragged along for a lot of that ride.
So my background is that I've worked for some of Australia's most established and fastest growing travel companies, planning multi-day adventures and navigating everything from cyclones to border closures. I'd very much be your go-to person when it comes to organisation and logistical planning.
And I come from a background of outdoor education and expedition leadership, and I've been lucky enough to guide and work all over the world. I'm also a teacher and a trainer and assessor of outdoor leadership. And together we've trained guides and hosts and supported tourism programs on the ground and from overseas, and helped build experiences that balance safety, quality, and genuine connection.
Yeah, so we were looking for something that combined all of our skills, knowledge, and experience and create adventures and opportunities. So here we are. And then we found Santo in Vanuatu. So we had been looking for a destination that was untouched and unspoiled, yet had the culture, the history, and the warmth that others would enjoy. We also travel with an adventure lens, and so we felt that Santo ticked every one of those boxes. And so here we are. I'll hand you over to Hayden. He'll give you a bit of a geography lesson on where you
So we realised this was a bit of an important lesson as the more people that we talk to, family and friends, and as we've started to share the business, people seem to be pretty confused as to where exactly was Santo or Vanuatu in general. So you can see out to the east coast of Australia, we have the Pacific Islands, and those are actually broken up into a few little subgroups. So we have Melanesia, which is the orange, which is Papua New Guinea, Solomon Islands, etc. Micronesia up above, which is Kiribati, etc. And then Polynesia further out to the east with New Zealand and Tonga. And right in the heart of this region sits the country Vanuatu. So it's a nation of remote islands. It's actually made up of 83 in the north. You can see the largest island of Vanuatu is Espiritu Santo.
And while we already had our eye on this incredible island, it seems that Solomon Airlines had two. In October 2025, they added a direct flight to Santo from Brisbane, and it proved so popular that they've now increased that to 2 times a week. We think the most beautiful part is that it only takes 2 hours and 40 minutes from Brisbane, which of course is a very accessible.
So zooming in on Vanuatu itself, you can see, as I said, it's made up of 83 separate islands, and all of them have a completely unique culture, history, landscape, and there's so much to see and do across all of them. As we continue to grow, we hope to kind of spread to more of the outer islands, but for now we're really focusing in on that northern island of Espiritu Santo. And just as I said before, a lot of people are maybe aware of Efate or Port Vila. That's kind of the extent that most people know of Vanuatu, but as you can see, it extends a lot more beyond just that main So just a quick orientation to the island of Espiritu Santo. You can see it's got a lot of jungle and a big rugged mountain range down the west coast, so that's fairly uninhabited and pretty hard going. In the top of the island, you have Cape Cumberland and Cape Quiros, and in between those, it's called Big Bay. Then down the center of the island, the names are pretty imaginative. You have the Big Bay Bush in the north, the Middle Bush in the center, and South Santo and the South Santo Bush below that. And then down the east coast is what more people kind of see and know about. So in the north of the east coast, you have the northern beaches like Champagne Beach and Port Owie. In the center, you have Turtle Bay and a lot of the blue holes that you might have heard of. And down in the southeastern corner is the city, which is Luganville, which is the remnants of the World War II base. And that's also where the airport and most of the amenities are. And that's also where most of the famous dive sites are located. So both recently and historically, Santo has been much harder to get to, which is why it's retained its undiscovered and untouched charm. From about 3,500 years ago, they have pottery remnants over on the west coast. And this was some of the earliest Melanesian travelers coming to the area. In the 1600s, you had the Spanish come and visit and try to set up a colony in the Big Bay area. They only lasted a few weeks before they were kind of chased out by locals and disease and the troubles of living in the tropics. And then Santo remained largely untouched for around 200 years until the British and the French turned back up in the early 1900s. And they decided they were going to try and co-own the island in what they called a condominium. And locally, that was actually known as a pandemonium instead, as it basically created chaos for the next 100 and so years. Having two systems of government, two languages, two currencies, two schooling systems, two legal systems, you can imagine that has left quite a tangle. And you'll still see today many of the families splitting their children between French schools and English schools as a result. In World War II, Santo became the largest operating base for the US outside of Pearl Harbor. And obviously, once Pearl Harbor happened, it became their kind of major forward operating base for the whole of the Pacific Theater. As a result of that, you have two of the kind of most iconic dive sites on the island, the Coolidge and $1 Million Point, being formed. And those are what really kind of started to put Santo on the map for tourism. So in the 1970s, you had Alan Power come over as a salvage diver on the Coolidge. And he basically decided it was a world-class wreck and wanted to keep it that way. So he put a lot of effort into preserving it and bringing people to come and see it. And shortly after that, Hotel Santo opened and that began tourism. A few years later, in 1980, Vanuatu gained its independence from that French and English condominium. And Santo, for a short while there, was actually going to become its own nation or country due to its strong custom beliefs, which we'll talk about shortly. Then into the 2000s, you started to see tourism creep out from those reefs and wreck dives and start to promote more of the island. So we had things like the blue holes started to gain recognition and the Millennium Caves. Recently, unfortunately, they had a little bit of a bad run. So Cyclone Harold happened in April 2020. COVID shortly after that, as we're all aware. And because of both of those things, Air Vanuatu, the national airline, actually fell over. So it went into liquidation in May 2024.
So in spite of all of that, or possibly because of it, right now is the perfect time to visit. So it's still incredibly quiet and untouched and beautiful. As I say, the direct flights from Brisbane make it hugely accessible. It's super quick, 2.5 hours to get there. Of course, you can transport through via Brisbane, although you can also go via Port Vila, and Air Vanuatu is back up and running with flights departing quite regularly. And most importantly, the Ni-Van people are so ready and willing to welcome us back onto their island. And so the Ni-Van way of life is the exact reason why we, but especially I, fell in love with the island. I really love that, kava is a big part of their day and makes everybody very relaxed, and that very much contributes toward the island time that you'll come across. I really love driving up the highway in the back of the tray of the U, and just as you're driving, everybody is smiling and waving as you go, which creates like a really beautiful sense of safety and community. In the more remote parts of the island, the communities still practice a Kastom way of living. This encompasses the customs, belief, and ancestral practices carried down generationally. Because of this continuation of this Kastom way of life, you will have the opportunity to be a part of these traditions. So things such as water music, bamboo band, kava ceremonies, and you can stay in the village, so very much get to immerse yourself. And so you may be wondering, this island has everything there. Why book through Unmapped Expeditions? Well, we are an outbound tour operator, which means that we are bringing you. So we work exclusively with local partners to deliver sustainable tourism opportunities. We organise everything from start to finish so you can just step off the plane and turn off your brain, and we'll make sure that you're prepared, you have the right gear and knowledge and all of those kind of things. We'll make sure that you're collected from the airport, you've got your accommodation all organised and everything in between. In our experience, it can be incredibly difficult to navigate by yourself. The locals, we joke, like to communicate via coconut telegrams. So that tells you something about how hard it can be to organise something, especially while you're there on the island. And also what we want to do is to provide a spotlight for the locals, to showcase their incredible backyard, and also design an itinerary that means that you don't miss out, that you see all of the best bits and make the most of your time while you're on Santo.
We also provide a safety net. So as you heard from our backgrounds, managing and coordinating the local teams through our safety and risk management systems. And a great example of that is we recently went over and ran some guide training. And a lot of that was focused on the rescue and the wilderness first aid elements.
And so for the moment, we've created 4 really special itineraries, varying in difficulty level and also what your interest may be. So we've got something, it's designed for adventurous families through to, if you want to summit the highest peak in Vanuatu. We also have a few more in the pipeline, but let's go into them individually. With our highlights of Santo expedition, this one I'd say is perfect for an adventurous family with children aged 6 and up. You definitely, as it says on the label, see all of the highlights of Santo. So you will go to the Blue Holes, you will do Mount Hope River Float, which is a lot of fun. You will get up onto the northern beaches and also spend the night in Vunaspeth Village, which we're going to talk to a little bit further in the presentation. But it's the island's biggest draw cards, making it super easy and make sure you don't miss out.
One definite highlight from the island is the Blue Holes. So there's a couple of famous ones like Nanda, Riri, and Matabulu, but there's plenty more all over the island. They're a unique result of the limestone throughout the island, so there's a lot of caves still to be discovered. Watch this space. And basically they filter all of the groundwater, all the rainwater, and it bubbles up through these cave systems and comes out in these incredible blue holes. And it's hard to believe, but they do actually look exactly like you see in the pictures here. It's not one of those, Instagrammable kind of what you see is not what you get. It really does look like that. You don't need filters. You don't have to crop out the 1,000 other people that are in the way of your photo. You will have them to yourself, and they really are that blue and that clear.
Yeah, that picture there is the one at the bottom is our son Charlie swimming in the blue holes. That was actually just taken on our phone. That visibility is 23 meters deep. So just to give you a quick capture, it's absolutely beautiful.
A lot of them also flow out to the ocean. So that means they're accessible by kayak. And we do work that into some of our journeys. So you can have a journey-based expedition and paddle in.
So if that one sounds really interesting, but you maybe want a bit more of a challenge, then perhaps the Santo Wild Expedition would be a really great option. The absolute highlight of this expedition is Millennium Caves. So we've designed this itinerary for probably ages 14 and over. And the reason why is because we took our son to do this expedition earlier in the year, and he did manage it, but you do need to be, fit and able. So, and there's no age cap on it either, but just think, there's going to be a lot of like climbing up and down ladders. It's really uneven underfoot. There's rock hopping, a lot of swimming involved, and it's a big day. It's very committing adventure, and so you definitely don't want to do that if you're concerned about your fitness in any way.
So as Sophie introduced earlier, they have the Kastom belief still in Vanuatu. And one of those beliefs is that all of the land is owned by a family and looked after by a family. And the area around Millennium Caves is looked after by the Andikar family of Vunaspeth Village. And that's where we hang out before and after the Millennium Caves. And also, as Sophie mentioned on the highlights tour, you go and get to spend some time there as well. The Andikar family were the ones that found the Millennium Caves. So John Baptiste, who's the chief and patriarch of the family, discovered the caves while he was out hunting for pigs, and he introduced his young sons at the time, Sam and Michelle, And they were actually then sent off to a tourism training certification to be able to take people through the cave. And it was one of the first sort of tourism developments on the island. Mm-hmm. So Sam and Michelle opened the cave in the year 2000, hence the Millennium Caves name. And they've been operating it ever since. Sadly, Sam passed away just a few years ago. And so Michelle's now looking after the venture until Sam's son Glenn can step in and take the role. Glenn actually took us through the first time that we went through the cave and looked after us very well. But he definitely has some aspirations to get out of the village and to see a bit of the world. We might have facilitated that by helping to buy him a passport. But hopefully you'll still come across Glenn when you enter the village.
Yeah, and he was also part of our guide training, right? And he really loved it. And I think that gave him a newfound love for his village and, this amazing experience they have on their land. So those two are amazing ways to explore the island in different challenging levels. So reach out if you're not sure which one might be the right one for you, but you can absolutely guarantee you will see all of the island highlights and have a true off the beaten track adventure. Next, if you are more, one for the water and would like to do some scuba diving on the island, then our Santo Scuba expedition is absolutely incredible. It's been designed for divers with open water or advanced certifications, but again, we can kind of tailor make. We include 10 dives, and there are some, we've got these unique wreck dives, which we'll talk about a little bit more, but there's also the chance to see turtles and dugongs. And so for this presentation, we were tossing in, between, do we talk about $1 Million Point? Do we talk about SS President Coolidge? We could be here all night. So we did land on $1 Million Point, but if you are interested to learn more about either of these dive sites, we've written some really incredible blogs that can be found on our website. So again, reach out for the links if you'd like.
So as I mentioned earlier, during World War II, Santo became the US Army base. And a lot of the development that you see on the island still today, a lot of the roads and buildings are remnants of that. Even the international airport that you'll fly into was actually built by the US Army at the time. Obviously, at the end of the war, the island was filled with not just all that infrastructure, but all of the stuff that it takes to run thousands of troops on the island. And basically, the US had no way to get that home. They didn't have the money or the ships, and they didn't want to bring it back to America and flood their own market. So they decided they would try and sell it to the French. The French basically called their bluff and said, you have no way to get rid of it anyway, so we'll just take it for free. Thank you very much. And the US thought, we're not letting the French have it, so no one can have it. And they basically then pushed it all into the ocean. So millions of dollars, hence the name, worth of equipment, stores, millions of Coke bottles that they'd shipped there, and all of the equipment to put that there, all of the bulldozers, all the trucks, all of the everything, Jeeps, whatever you can think of that was on the island at the time, is now basically piled up just offshore. And that basically makes one of the most interesting dive sites, both for snorkeling and scuba diving, that you'll find in the world, and also so accessible. You can literally, from the second that you're on the beach, you'll start finding Coke bottles and all sorts. And every step that you take deeper and deeper, right out to like 75 meters deep, there's going to be piles of stuff, and you can try and discern, is that a bulldozer? Is that a tank track? There's so much to see. And now that it's had all of these years of growth, it's also become an artificial reef. So not only is it interesting military stuff to look at, but it's also covered in coral and sea life and fish and turtles and all of those good things.
All right, and then our fourth itinerary is for the absolute adventurer. If you are interested in summiting the highest peak in Vanuatu, then we would suggest the Mount Tabwemasana itinerary. This is an absolute rugged adventure. It's 6 days out in the bush. You will stay in traditional villages. You'll also be camping at base camps. And Hayden will tell you a little bit more about it. You'll never see me up there, but anybody like Hayden, a true adventurer, this is something for you.
So yeah, as Sophie said, this one is really for the true adventurers. So at the moment, you could count on one hand how many people get to the summit of this mountain every year. But it is something that Vanuatu really wants to develop and to bring people to. And it does have that draw card of being the highest peak in all of Vanuatu, so not just Santo. And also it's one of the highest things in the Pacific. If you kind of look in any direction, you're going to be right up there in the jungle. not only is it, the highest in terms of, it's 1,880 meters, but it's not just that. It's every meter of that is from sea level. So you're really working hard for those meters. And all of them are in jungle, in humidity, in all of the, mud and the sweat and the things that come with that. And the trail basically has to be recut every single time. So you can see on the left of this photo here, the guy holding the selfie cam, that's actually Carlo. He is the son of the chief of Karapua, the gateway village. And he's actually, one of the guides and came along on our guide training. He was in the recording last night, but we haven't managed to line him up to join us again this morning. But yeah, he basically knows the way, holds that traditional knowledge. His family for generations actually used to live up at Nokavula, which is essentially one of the base camps now, right below the summit. In recent years, they've moved down to the coast, but they still hold the knowledge and the access and the ability to get you up there. So Carlo and a couple of other guys from the village will be your local guides, and they'll take you through something like 20-something river crossings on the first day as you wind your way up the river valley. And then at some point you just turn left and you just start going straight up the side of the mountain. This is not up a spur line or on a path or, carved stairs or anything like that. It is just, cutting a hole in the jungle that basically closes behind you. Living and working with those guys to cut base camps and to really just exist in the jungle for a couple of days, and hopefully you get your little summit window and the weather clears. You might have seen on the slide before, there's actually twin peaks of Tabwemasana, and the local story is that each night as they get enveloped in the fog and the jungle cloud that comes over, that those peaks actually come together, and that they're husband and wife.
We could honestly do a 10-hour presentation on all things that you need to see and do in Santo. To name a few, you can do a turtle and dugong spotting tour. There's some really amazing horse riding as well with Megan. We're also going to be launching our Jordan River adventure quite soon. But even if it's just hanging around the markets and watching the locals, weaving and things like that, it's just a really special place to be. So the way that we do it is we have our itineraries and they are private, and they're priced per person with reduced rates as the group gets larger. There's also a private supplement available if you are traveling by yourself. All right, so where to stay on the island? So for our itineraries, we'd like you to be in the car as little as possible. So that means if, for example, you're doing the scuba diving expedition, it means that you might be on the south coast of the island, in which case we'd probably suggest like Deco Stop Lodge. It's really lovely, clean, nice restaurant and has great views of the ocean. However, our accommodation of choice is Turtle Bay Lodge. This is located on the east coast of the island. And the reason we love it so much is because it is just so well situated. You can get to all of the activities nice and easily, and the people are just lovely. They are so warm and welcoming. So as soon as you arrive, they'll remember your name and your drinks order and make you feel very special. And then also you can snorkel straight off the resort and you can kayak to the blue holes. It really is an incredible place to stay. And if you're looking for something a little bit more exclusive, you could have a look at Lopi Lopi Bungalows. That's run by Sue, who's just super lovely. Or else you've got Ari Resort, which is located off the south coast. It does take about a 5-minute water taxi to get there, which means if you're looking for a trip where you're just going to put your feet up for a week or so, that can be quite a good place to go. But if you're looking to do activities on the island, it does mean that each time you're having to get that water taxi. So just think about that.
And so while that's the Sophie side of the island, we do also like to include a little bit more of a rugged side. And most of our itineraries will have a trip up to Vunaspeth village and staying in the local village there. So you can see the Nakamal here, which is the sort of main communal hut. That's where the cooking and the eating and all of those good things happen. And then you'll have your own little private housing, which is pretty rustic, pretty basic, but it gives you a good insight into the Ni-Van way of life. We've also got some other indicative pictures here, so you can see the access into the village currently. They're working on a road, which we are told will be finished any day now, but we've also heard that it started work, I think, in around 2005. So quite often it looks like what you see here, quite muddy and torn up. It's about a half an hour walk in there.
Quite challenging, yeah.
On the way in, you also have to cross things like the bamboo bridge you can see in the bottom left there. So yeah, you can see that even if our most kind of like basically like the highlights, will still have to have some level of fitness and mobility to be able to get in there. And we also wanted to include a little shot of the toilet, of the amenities and the luxury that you get while in the village. So it does have obviously like a Western style seat, but it's just a drop toilet.
Yeah.
You can also see in the picture here, this is the Endcar family that we were talking about earlier. So Glenn on the right, his mother Heather, and his great-grandma Mary Rose, who will take care of you while you're in the village.
So now we'll go over some top tips while traveling to Santo. So the local language is Bislama, and they'll also have some native pidgin languages depending on where in the island that you are. They'll also, as we said, speak some English or maybe some French, but I wouldn't rely on it if I were you. In terms of currency, it is the Vaatu, which can be quite tricky to get from Australia or other countries. So we advise, if you can, you could just turn up into Santo Airport, and there is a little currency exchange just there. And look, they've always been quite a good rate for us while we've been arriving. We will organise a packing list if you travel with us as well, which will just help make you better prepared. In terms of visas, for Australian and New Zealand passport holders, there are no visas required, but you might just need to check where you're coming from. There is drinkable water on the island, and the power points are that of the Australian plug socket.
In terms of the weather, you can see the little infographic that I've created here to kind of show what happens across the year, but there is no real bad time to visit. I'd say the best weather is obviously like May to October when they're in their dry season, but you can see the temperature is pretty much stable all year round. It's always nice and warm. Just the humidity is going to change throughout the year. So if you're used to living in, Brisbane or the tropics, then you're going to be fine. You can visit anytime. If you're from the southern states and you are going to get a bit more knocked around by the humidity, then maybe avoid those sort of wet season months. Also, there is a bit of a cyclone risk in January, February, but that's something that you'll get forecasted ahead of time. Some of the busier periods obviously going to be the Australian school holidays. So June, July school holidays gets a little bit more busy, but when we say busy, we're not talking barley busy. We're still talking very quiet. And also obviously December, everyone likes to go there for the Christmas, New Year period.
Yeah. And also just the water temperature all year round is just magic. So the coldest it'll ever get is 24 degrees, the warmest 28. That just means that it's dependable whenever you decide to visit. One of the questions that we were asked last night in the live session was, what if I'm active and my partner isn't so much? Look, we can tailor make itineraries to a degree, but something we do really need to preface is that by booking with us, you are booking an adventure. It's not a kind of resort style holiday, although we do like to offer some downtime for you. So what I would say is if these aren't quite right, maybe just reach out and we can work out if something is more suitable for you. But I think our answer to that was, if your partner's not so active or a family member's not so active, Turtle Bay Lodge is a nice place just to sit and read a book for a week.
And lastly, just to finish on a bit of a teaser, we want to talk about what's next for us at Unmapped and what you might expect to see over the next coming months. So we've already recce'd the Jordan River up in the Big Bay Bush area, so that itinerary should be coming live on the website anytime now. We've also recce'd some South Santo walks, so interconnecting a few of the villages down there, Jaranui and Jaramaja. And the next big exciting recce that we're going to be doing is heading over and trying to discover or map some of the cave systems and canyon systems on the island. There was a big expedition in, I think, 2005, 2006, which found thousands of kilometres of caves all throughout the island, but they didn't have the resources or the people or the time to explore all of them. So many of them remain undiscovered. And beyond that, I'm sure that there's still a lot more to find. So the plan is to head over later in the year with a good friend of mine, Lucas. You can see us exploring some unknown routes in the Caribbean in this bottom photo. So the plan is to essentially come and do that, bring all of our gear and talk to some locals and see what we can find. And if we can, develop any of those into adventures for you guys in the future, or if that's something that sounds interesting to you and maybe you want to join in on that expedition, then let us know.
So that wraps up our presentation. So thank you so much for watching. We would love for you to reach out with any questions. We'd love to see you guys exploring Santo with us or without us. It's an incredible place to be. Thank you again for joining us, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, guys.